I want to begin with just some donkey images, which probably everybody in this room will have seen these kinds of images before. They are donkeys doing many tasks around the world, different tasks in different parts of the world, and they are, of course, key to communities and do work that otherwise would fall on women and children typically, but also would cause economic problems for them. Had I been making a speech back in the 1990s, what I would have spoken about, I may have spoken about donkey populations, and I would have said that the highest donkey population in the world was China, which actually was the case at that time. But if we look at what's happened in China since 1992, we can see there's been a complete collapse in donkey numbers there, down to just 2.6 million. These are China's own figures. And so really want to look at what is the cause of that and what is driving that. And it's been caused by the manufacture of a traditional Chinese medicine called Zhao. And this is what is making donkey numbers in China and now in the rest of the world, in some cases, plummet. So what is Zhao? It's a traditional Chinese medicine. It's used as a tonic. It can be boiled in water and drunk. It can also be used as a face cream to renew your skin and to improve your complexion. And demand for it has grown enormously in recent years. In part, that's because there's increase in wealth in China. It's in part because there's been some clever product placement. It's seen regularly in the top-rated soap opera in China. So it makes people, particularly young people, think it's something they should be using. And there's been some very clever marketing of it. And demand for a Zhao means demand for donkeys. Now, it looks to us that the demand it's grown massively, but it seems to be leveling off now. But they now need 4.8 million donkey skins every year just to keep up with the current demand. Falls in their own donkey numbers means that they can increasingly supply fewer and fewer themselves. They've made a huge financial investment into donkey farming, trying to increase productivity, but it hasn't yet borne any results. So this is leading to a global crisis in donkey numbers. So we can see in the latest FAO figures, we believe there's 50 million donkeys across the world. And China thinks, although we think this is overly optimistic now, they can supply 1.8 million donkey skins a year for their industry, which means they're trying to find at least 3 million a year from the rest of the world, and this is growing every single year. So this is where donkeys are now being sourced for China, and you can see they're coming from many, many different parts of the globe. And these are basically the legal routes. There is much illegal activity going on, particularly in places like Africa, where in many African countries it's actually illegal to slaughter donkeys. So donkeys are often stolen, poached, moved across Africa into countries where slaughter can take place, and then they are slaughtered for the industry. And of course, wherever money can be made, and it can be made quickly, that drives illegal and criminal activity, and people can make quick money. And there are always compromises as a result. Sadly, some of those compromises are in donkey welfare. I could have chosen a lot of images. I've chosen something that I don't think anybody in this audience needs to see any more than that. Poor transport, with donkeys being transported over many, many, many miles to reach a slaughterhouse. Income is driven by numbers. The more donkeys you sell, the more money you make. And that has led to indiscriminate use of donkeys. So as well as donkeys that could have been slaughtered, we've also got donkeys where foals are being slaughtered, and even pregnant donkeys are being slaughtered because simply it's just the skin that is required. Unskilled labour has moved into the marketplace because it's growing so fast, and there's been poor handling and bad slaughter. We've seen examples of carcasses being piled up at slaughter yards next to donkeys who are waiting to go into slaughterhouses. It's inhumane, and donkey sanctuary staff who have worked in this field for many years say it has some of the worst welfare they've ever seen. And the biosecurity risks are absolutely huge. There's a lack of hygiene at every stage of this. Last year in West Africa, there was a major disease outbreak that killed 60,000 donkeys all along the route that we know is the donkey skin trade route. And the OIE, the World Organization for Animal Health, agree that this outbreak was probably linked to the skin trade. And millions of untreated skins being shipped from all different parts of the globe and ended up in China. Well, nobody surely anymore needs to know or needs to be told about the risks that that carries. In China, they have, of course, temporarily banned wildlife markets because of a reaction to biosecurity concerns. They've not stopped the skin trade. It continues today. Donkey skins are still coming from everywhere in the world and being put into China. And it's not just China where these risks are. Waste disposal, where the donkeys are slaughtered, is poor in the extreme. And perhaps one of the biggest frustrations we have, and I'm sure many people in this room will have as well, is that these donkeys are being lost in communities that need them, because donkeys are one of the best ways of having a good, sustainable life in a poor community. I like this graphic that's been done by our Ethiopian office, so I give them a little credit on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. But many of you will know about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And these are goals that all governments, including our own, have signed up to deliver by the end of 2030. And of course, people make very obvious connections to donkeys when it comes to livelihoods or better food production or access to clean water. But it is much more than that. It's about climate change. It's about responsible use of assets. It's about gender equality. It's about children going into education. All these things can only happen where these communities have the means to provide for themselves. And this is becoming increasingly recognised. The United Nations Environmental Programme did a report last year warning about a sixth mass species extinction that is on the cards. But they spoke about donkeys in that report. They were talking about donkey leather, but donkey skins, donkey leather. The point they were making is that in these communities, a live donkey is worth much, much more than a dead one. And indeed, this is their own quote from their own report. If donkey leather is sourced from developing countries with weak environmental laws, what is the socio-economic and environmental impact? The unsustainable extraction of a resource, whether it's donkeys, plants, trees, or minerals, can have adverse effects on the environment and communities in distant lands. In the case of donkeys, a valuable mode of all-weather carbon-neutral transport is removed from those most in need of transport in remote rural settings. And as the Ethiopian proverb goes, if you don't have a donkey, you are the donkey. So I just want to run through a few of the things that we are doing at the moment to try and work to end this suffering. In Kenya, Kenya had become a magnet for the donkey skins trade. Kenya has, until very recently, allowed the slaughter of donkeys, but is surrounded by African countries that do not. The skin traders found that the Kenyan supply of donkeys simply ran out. So they've begun to bring them in from all of the surrounding countries with the exception of Rwanda. And this has caused major problems for those economies. In fact, in Ethiopia, which now does have the world's largest donkey population, even their government has reached the conclusion that they're losing them at such a rate it's a threat to their economy. And in fact, we've now formed a technical working group with the Ethiopian government and with many other partners. We're sitting around trying to work out a strategy so Ethiopia over the next 5, 10, 20 years will have the number of working equids it needs to be able to keep their economy going as well as it can. On the right of the picture there is an Ethiopian woman, Samuna, whose quote that goes with that photograph is, "Donkeys are like my right hand. My donkey doesn't fail me. She is everywhere, and she does everything." But the good news was that Kenya did ban donkey slaughter last week. So that's a great boost for the campaign. And it means that that whole hub has now got operating difficulties. I mean, I should say my experience of working in this campaign leads me to think that this means that it will happen somewhere else. I sometimes think the donkey sanctuary is a bit like Red Adair. Those of you who can remember Red Adair, he used to go around capping oil wells in one place after another. So whilst Kenya is great news, I don't really want to underestimate that at all. I suspect we'll be going somewhere else as a result. And I should also at this point say that this is not all being done by the donkey sanctuary. We have some brilliant partners who help with this work, particularly in Kenya. And I want to particularly mention Brook, and I want to mention Sparna, and I want to mention World Horse Welfare, because it is the collaboration of these organisations working together that gives us hope that we can do something in the future. We started to develop something that we're calling Donkey Defend, which is giving communities the means and the knowledge to be able to defend their own donkey communities. Cross-border trafficking is a major issue, and we've been working in Mali with a group called ARAF, and they do donkey defend patrols. We've bought them motorbikes, high-vis jackets, communications. They work with the local police. They patrol the border. It's a very difficult border. You can't slaughter in Mali, but you can if you move them out of Mali. So the borders into Burkina Faso and into the Niger are very attractive to them. And as that's become more successful, the growth of pinching donkeys from markets is growing. So people go to market, they go to work all day at the market, they go back, their donkeys have gone. And so our new scheme in Mali is a donkey parking scheme, where we will set up a donkey park with armed guards who will look after the donkeys all day. We put in cover and water, and we're even training the guards to be able to give some basic donkey welfare advice while they've got the donkeys together in one place. And we've got high hopes that donkey parking, you heard it first here, will become a major part, kit our tools to help in this disastrous trade. So things have changed. There is definitely a momentum towards ending the trade. I'm not going to go through all of those, but you can see that countries are taking notice, and we do make progress. There are now 19 countries who have banned the trade, and that's obviously very good for us and very good for the donkeys there, but there is much more to do. But it's not just about arguing about what's happening outside of China. We are engaged in China to try and make sure that we can work with them to cure this issue. And you can see in the photograph there's one of our Chinese partners is the International Cooperation Committee for Animal Welfare. And in the middle there is Madam Chi, who runs the group with a rod of iron, I think we would all agree. And on the left is Mike Baker, who is our chief executive at the Donkey Sanctuary. And the chap on the right with the dashing film star looks is, of course, Rolly Owers, who is also there. And yes, if you've already hugged and kissed Rolly today, that is him shaking hands in China recently. Perhaps should have had that graphic up a bit earlier. But we're not just doing that, we're also working with universities, so equid training is part of their veterinary training in China. We're working with the Azhou industry. People are often surprised to learn that, but we're not going to stop Azhou. We need to find a way to change what they do. And there is interest. There are two things I have great interest for. One is trying to make Azhou with less donkey in it, which I think would obviously reduce the numbers, make it more sustainable. And cellular agriculture. Much of the collagen in the world used in the cosmetic industry is artificially manufactured, and you can make a donkey version of that. And we are working with partners to try and form. It's an ill wind, as they say, but we're hoping the increased interest in biosecurity in China may point them towards cellular agriculture as being an answer. And so that's what we're working on. Because, as Simona said, I think she should have the final word. If there are no donkeys, there is no community. And at the Donkey Sanctuary, with Brooke, with Sparna, and with World Horse Welfare, we are absolutely committed to ending this bloody and awful trade. Thank you.